Hi, folks. Welcome to the Serial Cynic channel. Today, I wanted to talk about a topic or group, I should say, that I've known for about 20 years now. And I know about them because a dear friend of mine was a part of the group. She's long since left. Um, but over the past few months, they have sort of come back within this in my scope. And part of the reason why, well, let me put it this way. I live in New York City, and they're pretty much, you can find them on various street corners here in New York. So I've always known about them in that regard also, not just from 20 years ago, but just from seeing them on the streets here and there. But they came back in my scope of late because where I was raised in the Caribbean on the island of St. Kitts, um, they showed up down there. And people start to question, who are these people? What are they about? What are these people all about? Who are they? To be fair, or to clarify, this group has always been, I want to say, scattered throughout the Caribbean, and their teachings and so forth is not that far removed from things we heard growing up. There's always been something of a connection between people from the Caribbean and a connection to the continent of Africa. But the group that I'm talking about is really known as the Black Hebrew Israelites. And if you just go to YouTube right now and just look them up, you tend to see these guys who are on street corners, sound really angry. Their rhetoric is really boisterous, and their baseline message is just basically that we black people are the true Jews, and the Jews who currently are in Israel or even here in the United States or wherever they may be are basically imposters, and that black people are the true Israelites. Now, there are different groups and beliefs within the circle of the Black Hebrew Israelites. Some of them are rather quiet, stay to themselves, keep their business to themselves. That's the belief that they have, that they are Jewish or they are linked to the ancient Jews of the past or Israelites. And that's something I need to clarify right out off the top. There is this belief that there are people who are descendants from the 10 lost tribes of Israel, and then there are people who believe that they are modern day Jews in terms of the black community. And you have to understand, according to the Bible, there was Israel, then the kingdom of Israel split, and there was the southern part of the kingdom became known as the kingdom of Judah, and the remaining part of the kingdom remained as the kingdom of Israel. The northern kingdom, known as the kingdom of Israel, they were supposedly scattered around the, Western Asia and Africa, and perhaps other places about, on the Assyrians, whereby the southern kingdom, known as Judah, they were invaded, they were invaded by the Babylonians in 586 BCE and exiled to Babylon. The belief there, though, is that some of those Jews from Judah escaped into Africa, and from there they went to various places in Africa, even to West Africa, South Africa, and different places. We do know that there was a thriving community in Alexandria, Virginia, 200 years before the time of Jesus. Now, it doesn't mean that all the Jews basically stayed there. There's the belief that some of them left, went to other places, and ended up in places like West Africa, which is where the majority of black people on this side of the world, if they could trace it, would be able to trace their lineage, at least in part, back to some portion of West Africa. So the Black Israelites teach that that we black people are the true Jews. But I don't know if it's the belief across all of the groups, but I do know that the groups that I'm familiar with, they teach a distinction. They believe that there are continental Africans, or Africans, I guess you can say, from the continent, who are not Jews. And that's something I need to clarify also. What they get at is this. They believe, according to the Bible, or as the Bible states, that Noah had 3 sons: Japheth, Ham, and Shem. And the belief is that those 3 sons basically populated the world after the Great Flood. So in other words, they had children with their wives, and those children went on to form various nations. The belief is Ham fathered the African peoples, along with the people of ancient Canaan, or what we would call the Levant, what we would call today modern Israel, Syria, Lebanon, those areas in there, all the way down to Africa. Supposedly, Ham was the father of all those people, whereby Shem is the father of what we call the Semitic people, which would be what we call Jews today, or what we would call Arabs today. Japheth went on to basically father the Europeans and the Northeast Asians and so forth. This is what they believe. So the belief is that when Jews escaped the Babylonians in 586, of course the Babylonians grabbed a good chunk of them and took them to Babylon, modern-day Iraq, in that area. But the belief is that some of these Jews escaped and ran into the continent of Africa. And then they spread out across the continent of Africa. Supposedly, according to the Black Hebrew Israelites, when the era of slavery came about, not Arabic slavery, but Western slavery, the enslaved Africans who were brought to this side of the world, the belief is that these Semitic Africans, in their estimation, were the ones that were rounded up by the Hamitic Africans. Rounded up, sold to the white man, and shipped off in ships to come over to this side of the world. How they're able to make all this distinction and everything, I am not quite sure. But according to them, the Hamitic Africans, those would be the native Africans, they were no friends of the Semitic Africans, or that's who they rounded up, that's who they grabbed and brought to the white man and say, hey, you can have these. More or less, they're not like us, they're a different type of African. Again, how they're able to make this determination and distinction, I'm not quite sure. So this has been the belief that the people on this side of the world, the black people on this side of the world, whether you be from Haiti, whether you be from Jamaica, whether you be from South Carolina, Guyana, Nicaragua, wherever you may be from, according to different groups, these different countries that I just mentioned, or different places that I just mentioned, are descendants of the lost tribes of Israel, or simply put, they're just Jews. Now, what the black Israelites do, they use the Bible as proof or justification for their beliefs. They believe that Deuteronomy chapter 28, the blessing and curses chapter, refers to us as black people. They say, if you read it, everywhere in there, the things of the curses that are mentioned, they only fit one group of people, and that's black folks. And they go with it from there. Because it supposedly or allegedly fits black folks, that means it's talking about us black people, and it's talking about the Jews. The chapter basically states where God is telling the Jews in a covenant form, if you follow my covenant, if you follow what I tell you to do, you will inherit these blessings. And if you don't follow them, you'll inherit these curses. And the curses supposedly align with the experience of black folks. And based on that, they take that, run with it, and basically say, see, that proves that it's talking about us as black people, because only black people have gone through this type of thing. So now, the question comes up that today we have people in Israel, or here in New York, or in Miami, or wherever, who call themselves Jews. And by the way, this is my hometown of Charlotte Amalie in the background in St. Thomas. Anyway, they have the different people around the world who call themselves Jews. Now, in the Black Hebrew Israelite belief, again, I can't speak for all of the groups, but for the groups that I do know, they consider those Jews as imposters, that they're not true Jews. Basically, well, as a matter of fact, there was a book that came out sometime in the 1970s, which they used to promote this idea or this notion that these Jews in Israel are imposters and they're not true Jews. The belief basically goes that those Jews that who call themselves Jews, they basically descend from a kingdom, an ancient kingdom known as Khazaria, which is somewhere to the north or southern area of Russia today or something along that line. They're no longer around. But apparently the nobility of that kingdom in those days converted to Judaism. Now, we don't know whether or not the entire population did, but the nobility at least did. And when the kingdom fell apart, those people supposedly migrated westward to what we call Germany today, and they were the forerunners of what we call the Ashkenazi Jews. So the belief is these Jews are not blood Jews linked back to Abraham. They are Jews via conversion, thus they are not real Jews. Now, according to the Jewish world, you don't have to be born to a Jewish mom or father to be a Jew. Conversion is all you need, and you can still be considered a Jew, just like a person who's born to Jewish parents. So the Black Israelites basically use this to say those Jews over there are imposters. So they have a lot of harsh rhetoric toward them. Some also believe that these Jews in Israel today are technically descendants of Edom, or I should say Esau, who was the scorned brother in the Bible, whereby Jacob, the father of the Jews or the Israelites, was the blessed one. And Edom was the one, or Esau was the one that was basically rejected. So what they're trying to say is that when Nebuchadnezzar invaded Babylon back in the past, you read in the Bible where the Edomites, the descendants of Esau, Jacob's brother, scoffed and laughed and were happy that the Jews were taken up out of the land and moved on out. The belief by the Black Israelites is that these Edomites then moved into the land of Judah and basically occupied it, so that today's Jews are technically not the true Jews. This is basically their belief. This is basically what they run with. But when all of this is said and done, and I've skipped over a whole lot of things in here, of course, I do believe that there are people in Africa who can probably trace their lineage back to those ancient Jews and ancient Israelites. I'm not denying that. Jews have been in Africa. They have gone to Africa in different waves. Yes, it's very, very likely and plausible, considering the proximity, that when Nebuchadnezzar invaded Judah, that some Jews did escape to Africa. We also have the Jews in Ethiopia who came by route of, just back in those days, the back and forth movement that was going on, and the whole story of the Queen of Sheba and so forth, whether that's legend or fact. But again, considering the close proximity of ancient Israel and Africa, it's very likely that Jews went back and forth, and some may have lived in Africa, had children there, had families, and whatever. It's also not surprising to find that you may find Jewish people in West Africa. I think there's some people who trace themselves back to the ancient land of Israel. I think they're called Lemba tribe down in Zimbabwe, which is down in South Africa. So you do have that. I'm not denying that. You've also had Jews that have come down into northwestern Africa, like Morocco, and Western Africa, who escaped persecution from the Spanish and the Portuguese back during the age of exploration and so forth. So yes, I do believe that you can have Jews who live actually in Africa and who can trace their roots back to those times and so forth. One other thing I did fail to mention, though, is that, of course, there were also trading routes that ran from northeastern Africa, like Egypt, Ethiopia, that ran across the Sahara all the way over to West Africa. Again, people were moving back and forth, goods were moving back and forth, merchants were moving back and forth. And in the process, I am sure that there were Jewish people that went along this route and stayed in Africa, built lives, built fortunes and everything in Western Africa, as they did perhaps in Eastern Africa. So I'm not trying to say that there's no such thing as a person with black skin who cannot say that they're Jewish. Okay? I'm not saying that at all. So that is very possible. But one of the things that I happen to notice, and this is the crux of what I was trying to get to, one of the things that I noticed that is never mentioned and is never considered, but it's some irony. Remember what I said about the Khazars. When you hear black Israelites talking about Semitic Africans who are now over here, and I guess there's still some over in Africa, they never mention the same thing that happened with Khazaria. That what could have possibly have happened is that a lot of these, oh, forgot to mention one other thing. As another proof that they tend to mention is the fact that when you go to Western Africa, a place like Western Africa, you could find traditions and rituals that basically are based in Judaism. So they say, hey, look, that African tribe over there in Ghana or in Nigeria, look at what they do. They do things that we find in the Bible. They follow laws and rituals and rules that you find in the Bible, so they must be Jews. So, getting back to what I was trying to say now, they never point out something else. They just figure because this African tribe or whatever the case might be has names that seem to indicate a link to ancient Israel, or they follow rituals and customs and practices that seem to link back to the Bible, that they must be Jews. They fail to realize something, that perhaps these black-skinned Africans over there are not necessarily blood Jews, but they may have derived or descended from tribes or groups of people who basically converted to Judaism. Sorry about the lighting that took place there, okay? I'm here at the office, and I'm not going to get up, so you're hearing my phone going off and everything like that. So I'm terribly sorry about that. I'm not going to get up to turn back on the light and interrupt the video. So please bear with me and bear with the lighting that's going on. So again, they never look at the fact that perhaps these people who are following these alleged Jewish customs and practices and following certain rituals may have been descendants of people who converted to Judaism. They may have been, quote unquote, Hamitic Africans who converted to Judaism. It may have been a tribe, it may have been a group of people, or it may have spread around a community. Now you have to understand that in the past, Judaism or Jews, they went around proselytizing people. Today you might not find that too much, but back in time, Judaism was a proselytizing religion where they went about, and I'm not saying they were going around going to door and like Jehovah's Witnesses do today, but they were there and they basically passed on their religion to people who wanted to hear or wanted to follow. So you could have so it's funny how the black Israelite says that's what happened to the Khazarians. They converted to Judaism, so they are not true blood Jews. But in Africa, they don't mention that. Supposedly down in Africa, it's different. All the people over there who they consider to be Semitic Jews, or people who came on this side of the world as Semitic Jews, they're all in their blood linked to ancient Judah and ancient Israel. Never is it mentioned that some of these people, or many of these people, could be descendants of Hamitic Africans who actually converted to Judaism. Again, Jews are going back and forth along those trading routes. Jews were coming from Europe, fleeing persecution, and settled in parts of Africa. It is very likely and very plausible that places where they settled, there are Hamitic Africans around them. Again, I'm just using a term that black Israelites use. Hamitic Africans around them didn't decide to, hey, I like your religion. I want to convert to it. What do I need to do? What do I need to practice? Oh, I should circumcise my children. I mean, my sons. Oh, I should eat kosher food. Oh, I should observe the Sabbath. These people could have been simply converted Jews. So when you look back into history and you see where there may be names like Yah, Y-A-H, or their names have that, or they're using names like Benny, which means son, or whatever the case might be in their names, it doesn't necessarily mean that you just jump to the conclusion that that they're blood related to the ancient Israelites or the ancient Jews. These could be people that just simply converted, like Sammy Davis Jr. or like Madonna, who converted to Judaism. So this is never mentioned, but it's mentioned when it comes to the Khazarians. Oh, they converted. They're not true Jews. They're not full-blooded Jews like us. So why couldn't it be that Hamitic Africans could have converted to Judaism? And that it spread from here, from tribe to tribe, from this group to that group, and you can find pockets of Hamitic Africans or continental Africans that practice things that are very similar to what we find the other Jews of the world practicing. But I guess if you mention that, it will probably blow up the narrative that they have going on. Again, I am not denying that you may not be able to find people in Africa who can trace, or through some DNA testing, trace back to ancient Israel or the ancient Jews of the past or whatever, however that's done. I'm not denying that. Again, because of the close proximity of Israel to the African continent, Egypt, Ethiopia, Libya, wherever you may want to go with that, northeastern Africa, and the fact that they could have simply traveled along the trading routes of the past and the caravans. But again, it's never mentioned the fact that you could have Hamitic Africans who converted and became Jews. Their children passed on these Jewish traditions, or kept them up and passed them on to their children and passed them on to their children. Or you could have a person who converted, and it could have been a Hamitic African who converted. Maybe his household converted, and then maybe his mother-in-law converted, and then maybe his mother-in-law's family converted. And before you know it, you have a group of people in the community who are following these Jewish rituals, and who could go around and pass it on to other people and so forth. So it's not an exact science in what they're talking about that is clear, cut, and dry. That, hey, Dominicans, Haitians, Jamaicans, we're Semitic Africans, or we're Semitic people who actually just happen to be in Africa, but our lines trace back to ancient Israel. And that we were the ones who were rounded up, or our ancestors were rounded up by the Hamitic Africans and shipped over here. There is no exact proof of such a thing. That comes down to basically speculation. And then, of course, they fall back on the Bible to try to prove these points. And I don't exactly buy it. So I'm not knocking them for believing that you can't have people who can trace their line back to ancient Israel or ancient Judah and say that they live in Africa and that they're of that group. But again, they never seem to consider the fact that a lot of these people could be descendants of Africans. Africans, people were born there who can trace their line to Africa, who converted to Judaism and passed it on to their posterity. So it doesn't hold true there, or they don't bring it up there. But they mention it when it comes to Khazaria, that they're imposters. What if all these black Israelites who are trying to hitch their identity to ancient Israel, what if you doing that also prove that you're an imposter to the Jewish faith? Anyway, I leave those thoughts with you. Subscribe to the channel below. Respond if you would like to. Leave your comments down below, questions, thoughts. If you disagree with me, you can also put that down there. Yes, let your black Israelite friends know. They can look at the video and so forth. Let them come in. I'm sure some of them might want to bite my head off or want to educate me. Feel free. I'm not deleting anybody's comments, and I'm not discouraging anyone from commenting. Okay? But I want to thank you for tuning in today. Sorry about the lighting again because it went off. I just didn't feel like getting up and interrupting the video. But I want to thank you for tuning in to the Serial Cynic channel today. And again, please remember to subscribe. Comment down below also, okay? So until the next episode, you guys take care.